my name's Rod, for anyone that hasn't met me. Today I'm just going to give you a bit of an introduction into iBeacons, with an idea that I've brought a number of iBeacons along for people to play so my name's Rod, for anyone that hasn't met me. Set the tone, I'm just going to give you a run through of what they are, some of the things you can do, some of the caveats around them. So just a general introduction, and then later on in the day you can hit me up and borrow some beacons and hack away with them. I've got the slides online as well, because they have a number of links in them, so if you want to write that down, or I'll send it to you later. About me, I'm a web and mobile developer at Envoy. I work mostly in ASP.NET, MVC and C#, but I guess most relevant to today is I've done a number of native iOS apps and some Xamarin apps as well, so I've had a little bit of experience there. In terms of iBeacons, I'm just mainly an enthusiast. I think they got a bit of a potential, so I've bought a bunch of them myself and just muck around with them at home. So what are iBeacons? Basically, it's an Apple trademark for Bluetooth low energy beacons. So generally, you'll hear them referred to as beacons, and if you're saying iBeacon, you're actually using an Apple trademark, so Android ones generally aren't called that. Basically, I've got a few here, so they come in various shapes and sizes. So they're small Bluetooth devices. They have a long battery life. They just transmit a signal regularly with a small bit of information just transmitted at a regular interval. Because they're Bluetooth, they have a relatively short range compared to other transmissions, so they're used for close proximity detection. So these devices transmit a packet. The iPhones and iPads detect the packet and then raise events based on the receiving of that packet. So just by definition, if you receive the packet, you're somewhat near one of these beacons, but you can also estimate your approximate distance to the beacon. So what can you do with them? Some of the things that people are working on are mainly around context awareness. So we've always been able to detect GPS signals, work out your location based on Wi-Fi positioning, and that gives you a bit of context in your app. You know where in the world you are approximately. Time is another bit of context, so because you know the time zone, you know what time it is. So a lot of apps have done things around GPS and that sort of thing, whereas iBeacons let you take it a step further and go where GPS doesn't let you go. Things like indoors where there's no GPS signals, and just a greater degree of accuracy. So I can detect that I'm standing really close to this laptop as opposed to just within sort of 10 meters or so. So iBeacons themselves, in terms of iOS development, they let you raise notifications and events based on proximity. So the big thing that everyone's using them for is retail. You can, when you walk into a store, you can have your app pop up, say, oh, welcome back to the store, here's a discount. Museum exhibits, so when you walk up to an exhibit, your phone will know what exhibit you're looking at and provide some more information. Home automation is another one that's starting to come along. So if you have a beacon in your house, your phone knows that you've arrived home and can then ping something else to perhaps turn on the lights or whatever. And opening tickets and loyalty cards. So Passbook integrates with iBeacon. So there's people that when you walk up to a gate, it can detect that you're there and open up your ticket, or if you walk up to a counter, it can open up your loyalty card for them to scan. But if you take things a bit further, there's some possibilities around indoor navigation. So if you put enough of these beacons around, you can get a fairly decent location indoors. You could detect what aisle you're on, and it could point you to a different aisle, indoor mapping, that sort of thing. Virtual leash, which is a bit of an interesting term, but basically I've got some beacons here that their primary use case is you tag them on your cat or something, and so when the cat runs away, it sets off an alarm on your iPad and you can go and chase it or whatever. Even further, there's some people that are working on iBeacon shoes. So when Alzheimer's patients try and walk away, someone gets alerted and they tell them to come back in. I guess you could do the same with children if you wanted. And inventory management's another one. So you can put these iBeacons in things and walk into a room and using your iPad detect how many of them there are, approximately where they are. So rather than, so it's just an extended range on NFC and other types of scanning which are used for that sort of thing. What can't you do with them? Well, you must have the app installed on your device for them to do stuff. So a lot of people get worried about all these beacons around and think that you can just be tracked without your permission. But basically, they're just dumb devices that just send out a signal, and it's up to your iPhone to do the tracking. So I once had a guy call up our work wanting to know about iBeacons because he just read about them. He owned a factory, and he was upset that his workers seemed to spend a lot of time in the toilet, and he was sure that they were just on their phone. And so he'd read about these iBeacons in the paper, and he said, oh, well, I'll just put some iBeacons in there, and then after 5 minutes, it'll pop up on their phone saying, all right, get back to work. Yeah, he was upset when I told him that they actually have to install the app that lets the boss track them on the toilet. So he said, oh, they'll never do that. So that killed that idea. Yeah. Some examples of where they're in use. So Virgin Atlantic at Heathrow Airport has started getting on board with them. They use it mainly for the ticketing, but they've come out and said that they see a lot of potential. One of the things they specifically mentioned is that they're looking at ways of using it to enhance a frequent flyer's experience. So if you're a platinum frequent flyer and you start walking into the lounge, could detect that on your phone and then ping the bartender to make your favorite cocktail, and then they come and hand it to you. So you can sort of have some interactions, not only just popping stuff up on the device, but the device can then ping someone else to let you know that you've arrived.
So the whole idea, it's a one-way communication, yeah, from the small device to your app, but not back.
Yeah, correct. So then it's up to the app. Your app can then ping someone else as long as you have it installed. But yeah, it's one way. Major League Baseball was another one that got on board. Their stadiums have iBeacons around, so they can tell you about the various history parts of the stadium. I was reading an article that the Geelong Cats are going to do something similar to that. Apple stores have iBeacons all throughout them. Westpac is looking at trialling them in branches. Museums, like Rubens House in Europe, have them for exhibits. And in Australia, so obviously retail, if you look up iBeacons on the net, every website's talking about rewarding your customers and that sort of thing. So in Australia, there's a company rolling them out to 45 shopping centres, starting with Manominee up in Queensland. So some of the different types of iBeacons you can get. The first brand's Estimote, which is probably the most well-known. So I've got some of them here. They're really targeted towards the development community at the moment. So they've got a nice branding. They look kind of funky. They've got a slick website and good developer experience. So you'll generally find that most samples on the net will be around using Estimotes. They're easy to get a hold of. But they're only in developer preview at the moment, so there's 3, you get a pack of 3 and they're not meant for production use. So I bought a pack of 3 a while ago and they've gone flat now, unfortunately. And they don't have user replaceable batteries, which is kind of annoying. You could probably replace it if you tore it apart, but it's stuck together. So, but yeah, they got a nice SDK, and it's a good way to get started is with Estimote. So another brand is Stick and Find. So this is one of their example beacons. So it's much smaller. They're the same people that made the cat tracking one. They have been around for quite a while. They started out, those cat tracking ones weren't actually iBeacon, so they came out before then. And then they upgraded the firmware to support iBeacon, but seeing as they weren't designed around it originally, it wasn't the best experience and they got panned for it. But they're actually quite a good company and make good stuff, so their enterprise stuff's quite good, and I've had some good experience mucking around with their beacons. And I like them because they're much smaller. This one has a 3-year battery life compared to 1 apparently on that. And yeah, you can get up to 9-year battery life, they reckon, on theirs. So there's other ones like Contact.io, so that's these ones here that I got. You can actually white label your own beacons on their website, so they've got a nice experience for that. And there's various other brands popping up. Blue Cats is one in Sydney, various ones. Importantly, every iOS 7 iPhone and iPad can be a beacon, so you can set it up to advertise itself as a beacon to other devices, which is good for testing, and it also makes for some interesting peer-to-peer communication possibilities. MacBook Pros also can be beacons. So there's an app called Quick Beacon, which I'll show you later on. So you can tell that to transmit as a beacon, which is very handy for when you're testing stuff. So characteristics of the different devices you can get. So battery life, generally between 1 and 3 years. Some claim that you can get much longer, but they just have bigger batteries generally. And they're always overstating how much battery life you actually get. Because you can adjust the power level on them and that sort of thing, so it's sort of like, if you want a really low power level, then you could get this long. So if you were to go to a customer and say, just buy these 1-year beacons and you'll be set for a year, then they're going to call you after probably 8 months and say, what the hell? Size, some of them have temperature sensors in them, so the Stick and Find and the Estimote both have those, which is interesting for inventory management style of things. So like you could put in a shipping container and you could see how hot it's getting in there and that sort of thing. The Estimotes recently unlocked their accelerometer, so they've always had an accelerometer, but it wasn't made available through the API. So you can detect when the beacon's getting moved, which could be interesting for like opening a door or something like that. Power level and range, a lot of them claim quite high ranges, like up to 70 meters, but it's very dependent on the environment that you're in. So walls, humans, water, that sort of thing. It's just a signal. So whatever affects that is going to affect it. So you probably don't want to rely on it being much more than, say, 10 meters. And some of the different beacons have their own SDKs. So Estimote has their own SDK, Stick and Find does as well. Generally to add extra features, like the iBeacon spec doesn't have anything about accelerometers or temperature sensors. So if you want those advanced features, and security as well. So a lot of them add encryption to their signals. So into the tech side of it, each beacon is identified by 3 major components that you set up on the beacon prior to installing it wherever you're going to install it. The first one is there's a unique identifier, which is meant to identify who owns the beacons. So McDonald's would generate their own unique identifier and embed it into the app. So it just separates yours out from all the other people using them. Estimotes all came with a pre-configured unique identifier. So you'll find a lot of people using that. Their apps are hard-coded to use Estimote ones. They're making that user editable now, so along with all the other ones. Then there's the concept of a major and a minor. So once you've got all the beacons that you know, you can group them then into what's called a major. So you give it a 16-bit unsigned integer, which is used to group beacons that your company owns. So if you wanted to detect when you walk into a McDonald's restaurant, you would give all the beacons in that restaurant the same major and the same unique identifier, and your app can then just say, I want to be alerted when I walk near one of them. So basically, in this hierarchy here, as you go down, you need to give iOS your unique identifier, but the others are optional, so you can get more specific as you go down. So the minor is meant to differentiate beacons within a major group. So what you could do is you could say, well, give me all the ones with this major, so you get alerted when you come into the store, but then you can look at the minor to see which beacon they've come into contact with. Or you could just say, I only want to know about this one beacon. So there's sort of two concepts in the iOS SDK, is monitoring versus ranging. So you register with iOS to monitor beacons using the three things I was just talking about, and that will then alert you when you come into range of them. So basically, as soon as it receives a signal from one, it'll raise an event, and then you can be alerted when you then lose that signal. So that's monitoring. So it's a simple binary operation. You either get the signal or you don't. And then you can choose to start ranging. So they can estimate how far away they are from your phone is away from a beacon based on the power level and the received signal strength. It's very approximate. So they give you a distance in meters through the API, but they tell you don't use it because a lot of the time it's just rubbish. So they split into near, far, and immediate. So if you're building an app, then try and work around that. But ranging is much higher battery use, so it's constantly using the phone's Bluetooth, whereas monitoring only detects things at a certain period. So the packet that gets transmitted, so there's a Bluetooth low energy spec which determines what the device should send out when it's advertising. And then within that, there's a portion for data, which Apple then defines what you should put in that section of the packet to declare it as an iBeacon. So that's the prefix for iBeacon to say I'm an iBeacon, and then your three components followed by the transmitting power. So you can change the transmitting power on your devices, and if that's reported to the iPhone and or iPad, it can use that transmitting power to try and work out how far away it is. Yeah. So I've got a sample bit of code in Xamarin. So it's pretty simple. I've got my unique identifier here. I'm just going to search on the major, so it's a short. I'm just going to call my region. So you set up a region, a beacon region, which is this bit of code here. So I set up my beacon region. I tell it that I want to search on the unique identifier, the major, and I want to refer to it as my demo region. So as you can see in the overloads, I could have just searched on the unique identifier, or I could search on the minor as well. Then I tell it that I want to be notified when I enter that region or when I exit the region. And this property I'll go into a little bit later, but it basically tells iOS that when you turn your phone on to check for beacons and then notify, but I'll go into the reasons behind that in a sec. So then it's pretty simple. I open up the location manager. I raise an event for when I enter a region. I check that it's the region that I set up. So I've only got one set up, but if I had multiple ones, I'd need a case statement there. In this example, I'm raising a notification which can be notified in the background, and also changing a label on the screen. When I leave the region, I'm saying, yeah, I've lost the beacon. And I'm also ranging at the same time. So I'll fire, sorry? Yeah. Why isn't that zooming? Is that better? Yeah. So I'm ranging at the same time. So I've got an event for when the range comes in. I make sure that I actually got some beacons, pick out the first one. So it will give you a collection with all the beacons that it's detected, and it will tell you the proximity, the accuracy in meters, and the strength of the signal that it received. So I'll fire up the app here. So I've got my various labels there. So this up here is Quick Beacon. So it costs $5. It's a pretty cool utility. So you can set up what identifier, what major, what minor, and what power level, and then just fire up the beacon. So now my Mac is transmitting to my iPad. The iPad's found the beacon. Oops. It's saying that it's near. Now that I've got the beacon right there, it's immediate. So as I walk further away, I'm not sure if it'll get too far, but you can see the distance going up there. So as you can see, the distance, it's saying that it's 0.3 meters, which isn't too bad right there, but yeah, it can be quite inaccurate. So yeah, that's a pretty simple example of setting it up on iOS. So from there, you can think about what you would do within your app. You might want to detect multiple beacons within a range. Don't raise a notification until you've got multiple ones, that sort of thing. So some tips around using iBeacons that I've learnt from reading other people's experiences and from my own. The environment is very important. So where you place your beacons has a big effect on how they perform. You can calibrate the power level to your environment. So there's an iOS sample app which is ported to Xamarin as well that lets you calibrate your beacon. So what it will do is you hold your beacon, you measure a meter from where you're trying to detect the signal within your environment, so the store that you're installing it in, and it will tell you what power level to set your beacon at for it to read the meter accurately. Ranging, which was the one that tells me the distance away, that's only for foreground apps, so you can't have the phone in your pocket walking around and detect when you come within a meter or whatever. You have to do ranging in the foreground, you can't do it in the background. So the only thing you can do in the background is monitoring, so be alerted, have your app fire up when you come within range. One way to get around this that some people are doing is you turn the power level right down on your beacons so that it only goes as far as you're trying to get when you monitor. So then that might remove the need for ranging. And you can use multiple beacons around the place to try and get a better fix. So wait till you get 3 signals and then you know a triangulation of where you are. So responsiveness is an issue that people run into. Detecting a region change in monitoring can take up to 15 minutes, which surprises a lot of people. They kind of expect it to be instant. But basically it's to do with battery life. So iOS doesn't want your Bluetooth detection chewing up everyone's battery. So at the worst case, it can be detecting only once every 15 minutes. Generally ranges around, but 15 minutes is the max. When you're ranging, so when you're in foreground and detecting the distance, you get updates every second. You get monitoring alerts every second. So the notify on entry state display that I showed you in the Xamarin app before, so that tells iOS that when the user turns on their screen to check their text or whatever, do a beacon scan and notify your app then. So to work around the 15-minute issue, you can set that property, and then whenever they turn it on, then that's straight away a trigger. So the unfortunate reality is that if you're hoping that when someone walks by your store, you alert their app and say, hey, come on in, then it's going to be difficult because it could only come once every 15 minutes. There's a good article I've linked there that explains a bit more into detail about that. So Android. So obviously iBeacon's an Apple trademark. They came up with the spec. And Android is not quite as well supported as iOS. It is possible to use them though. So there's a company called Radius Networks, which is doing a lot of cool stuff around these things. They're the people that made that, the Mac application. And they've also made an SDK for Android to use iBeacons. But it only supports Android devices from 4.3 and up, because they're the only ones that support Bluetooth Low Energy. So that's about 23% of the market from what I could tell, which is unfortunate. And also because it's not built into the OS, it's not as efficient on battery, so it's another thing slamming your Android battery. Hopefully Google I/O, I think it's next week, hopefully they'll announce something around this, but we'll just have to wait and see. So the Radius Networks component is free to download. They got a premium version that does some extra stuff, but basically it tries to mirror the iOS API to some extent. And someone's made a component for the Xamarin Component Store that has the Radius Networks Android SDK. So you can just pull that component into your app and use it. So Samsung also has a proprietary SDK on some of their older devices. I think the Galaxy S3, I think was the first one. So if you really want to get maximum Android support, you could muck around with that, but it's another API to deal with inside your app. So I've linked the component there, and Xamarin have a good example on their blog of using it. Unfortunately, I don't have a Xamarin Android license, but I'll show you the code that they've got. So they have a monitor notifier. They set up their region in much the same way. They have a range notifier. They start monitoring, start ranging. So it's very similar concepts. They have enter region, exit region, same sort of events. And you can see they still have the proximity type, immediate, near, and far, and yeah, events like that. So it's very similar to the iOS one. So you can just follow the same sort of concepts. We'll go back up. So that's about it on iBeacon. So hopefully it gives you just a general introduction. Yeah, as I said, feel free to come and grab some of my beacons throughout the day, or you can just buy the $5 one for your Mac as well, and just hit me up with any questions.
I've got one. So I was getting confused about iBeacon and where I can use them and things like that. So just want to check if I've got it correct. The beacons themselves aren't proprietary because there are other people that are building them, so we've got all those different vendors.
Yeah.
But the thing that was the iBeacon was that it's a new feature in iOS as an operating system level thing. So like how OS have a notification center that's only on that, the iBeacon thing is only currently on iOS, built into the OS.
Yeah, so iBeacon defines the packet structure they send out. You can detect them on Android, so like it's just a packet structure that other people implement. But you can get like iBeacon certified beacons, and so that they have to get approval from Apple to be an iBeacon certified one. Okay. Yeah, it is a little bit confusing.
Sure. So that's why I'm double checking, because like I didn't realize with Android that there was a SDK for that, because they are just Bluetooth low energy things. We just need it's not a operating system level thing, which is why it's an external SDK.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming the same is going to be the same on Surface tablets or Windows phones. They've got Bluetooth LE on it, but there isn't a operating system level thing sitting there waiting for Bluetooth LE devices.
Exactly. Yeah. So your app could probably still detect the packets from those Bluetooth low energy devices, but they're not built into the OS. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Now it makes more sense. Thanks.
Yeah. Cool.
So with Bluetooth low energy devices, do you see them replacing RFID tags, or are they different products solving different problems?
I think they're somewhat different at the moment, because they're about $30 each, and RFID tags are a lot cheaper. And it's sort of like RFID is like really immediate, and then I see this as being a little bit further away. I think Apple might have different opinions, but I can see that they both could interact. Both could be part of a solution. Doesn't necessarily mean one replaces the other at the moment. Especially at the price. The price is the main thing. If you're trying to stock your store and have RFID tags on various different things, then you're not going to pay $30 each. So, yeah. All right, thanks a lot.